Now everyone, let's go and talk about the div element. But before we go there, let's go and open our document here. And let's see the current content of our document based from the changes that we have made in our previous session. So right now, I've already eliminated here some of the initial content. So let me just rearrange this, so at least it will be a lot easier for us to do some refreshing, just like with the JSBin website. So right now, let me just refresh that. And what I want to do here will be to place the navigation element here. Let's go, and I would want it to be on the right side of the page. So I will be placing the navigation here, and this logo image here that we embedded. I would want it to be placed here. So let's go and try to do that in this example. So we have our div element. So when we talk about the div element, this is a content division element. It's a generic container for flow content, and it has no effect on the content or layout until you use CSS. As we can see here, we have a CSS declaration here. So just to give you an idea, again, this is an element selector. We have a declaration block. We have a property declaration and the value of that property. And here we have another property declaration and the value of that property. Okay. So we usually use element selectors in referencing to our document here. So we do have here the body element, and that's the name of the element, and we want to style it using a CSS. We made use of the name body here, which is the official name of the body element. So the div tag will be defining the division or a section in an HTML document. It can be used as a container for HTML elements. Then you can apply CSS or manipulate the div element using JavaScript. It is really easy to style a div element using the class or ID attribute. So what do I mean by that? So we are here inside of our header element. Okay, I made a mistake here. I don't want this to be outside of the header element, so I'm going to control. So that's a common thing, guys. You need to be quite meticulous when it comes to looking at your code here, because sometimes you make certain mistakes, and again, that's very normal. Don't worry, that's something that you might encounter in the long run. Then the important thing to remember here will be on how you solve the problem. So again, here I will be formatting my document here, so at least it will be automatically formatted. So now we can see that the div element is inside of the header element, and we have the nav element and the image element here. So let me go, and I'm sure that you understand now that the image here is an embedded content, and it's also an empty element. So I'm going to be deleting that, so at least there won't be that much comments that will not be too descriptive of our code here. So I'm just going to put here a heading section or a header section. So at least header section. So at least we will know that this is the header part of our document. Now I would want to transfer all of this inside of our div element here, and I would want to give it a class name. So I would want to describe this as part of the header, and it's a container. So what I'm going to use here is I'm going to use the class name header, but you can actually put anything here as the class name. But the idea here, everyone, is that this should be descriptive of the use of the div element that you've just created. So at least it will be a lot easier for you as the developer to know, hey, this is the part of the document that is inside of the header, and I named it header container because I will use this as a container for other elements that will be nested inside of it. So this will be the parent element, and it will be the header container that will be containing the nav element here and the image element that I will also be placing inside of other div elements. Okay, so you will see now that I am creating a nesting of elements using the div element here. And let me just, oops, sorry, control X and then control V. Now we have two div element that is inside of the header container that we have here. So we can now go and reference that name that we gave it, and we called it header container, so that we can apply some styling inside of it, so that we can easily identify the container here. Let's go and give it a background declaration color property of something that will be showing us that we already have a header container here. So we do have here aquamarine. Let's see what will this look like. But by the way, before we go and change anything here, let's go and see the view page source here. Or no, sorry. Let's go and inspect element and see if it's already showing up in our developer tools here. So let's go look for the header section, and then inside of the header section, there's still nothing here yet because we haven't refreshed it. Okay, sorry. So you need to refresh the browser first. Now we can see that we have the header container here. Okay, and if we go to the layout, we can see here that the default properties are content box. For the box sizing, display will be block. That's the default value for header containers, or let's say the div element that we have here. So right now, what I want to do here is to change the color of the header container here, so at least we can see background color. Let's make it something more orange red. Let's try to turn it to orange red. Let's see what will happen here. It's not showing up, so let me just go check here. Why is the header container here not showing our background color? Header container. Header container. Oh, okay. So you would see here, guys, that I only use a single underscore here, and that's the reason why I made a mistake. And here I made use of two underscore, so it was not working. And again, that's a good example of trying to find out what's the main reason why your code is not working. So if I refresh this, you will see now that it's already working. And that's a simple underscore that was the cause of the bug or the error in our code here. It's a simple mistake in me referencing here a single underscore I used for my CSS class name. So this time I'm calling this a class name because we gave the div element, we didn't use the name element here for div, which is the default name for elements that is commonly used to refer to the element that we would want to style. So this is a div element name. We have an element name here, but instead of using the div element name here, because we will be using a number of divs here, and if I try to go and use the div element here as the element name for the CSS declaration here, that will be inherited by the child elements that we have here that also has the name div element. So the best way to specifically give instructions to the browser to display a background color here will be, instead of using a div element, the div element name, the default name of the div element, we maximize the use of the class name header container here that we declared here inside of the class attribute, and we assign the value of header container. And as I've said, you have to be very specific because the browser, the computer will not be able to understand you if you make even a single mistake here. Like, for example, here in our code here, we made a mistake with the underscore here. There's no, we only used a single underscore here, while here we made use of two underscores, and that is not referencing it here. So the browser is not understanding that we would want to give this div element here with the class name header container the background color orange red. And you will see that Visual Studio Code will actually be giving you visual clues. And if I go and try to highlight the div element here, it's giving me visual clues. This is the great thing about code editors. They will be making your life easier when it comes to looking for errors. And as you can see here, if I just select this one, it will be selecting the main opening tag and the closing tag. But if I try to place it here, it will be selecting the second div element, and here another div element, and you would see that they have the proper opening and closing tag here. And that's the same reason why I formatted the document earlier. And if I highlight the div element here, it's highlighting all of the div elements that is found inside of our document. Now let's go and correct our error here, and let's go place a second underscore here. And now we can see that it was telling the browser that we would want to style this div element here with a color of background color orange red. Now if I go and try to only highlight this class name here, let's see what will happen. You would see that Visual Studio Code is highlighting same words, and if I continue to highlight this, you will now see that it's referencing the value here that we have declared inside of our CSS style tag. And we now know that this is now referencing this declaration here that's making the background color turn into orange. If we go and try to go and give this other div elements class names, I would want to maximize the use of the name header and then differentiate the class names by giving it a specific name that will be related to its content. So I have here the header nav, and here I would want to call this header logo box. And if I go up here and I apply the property selector here, the period sign, so you will be able to identify that the selector that you want to select will be, or the name that you would want to select here through the property selector here. We sometimes call the period sign here the property selector, but for class name, this will be identifying to the CSS declarations here that we are referring to a CSS name here using this selector, or this character, the period character. So we are selecting a class name. So it means we are referring to a class name that is inside of an element here. In this case, we are referring to a class name of the div element, the child element of the parent element of the header container here. So we have the child element, which is the header nav. So if I go and put some color here, and I will be saving it, you would see now that the navigation here turned into pink. And if I go to the header logo box, I will be selecting header logo box here and change the background color to green, just so that we can see that we can actually apply different styling techniques to our document using class names while using CSS, and at the same time maximizing the use of the div element. Just remember that the div element can be used to put inside any other content, such as other elements inside of it, so that we can go and position the elements according to how we would want them to be positioned, and at the same time style them using the selectors that we have here, which can be an ID or a class. When I say class or ID, that is pertaining to attributes of an element that you can use to reference it. So let's say I have here the header nav, and I want to call it and reference it using the ID here. So you can reference and identify and tell the browser that you're trying to reference the ID header nav here by using the number signs character here, and then the name that you've customized or you've declared inside of the element that we have here. So we have the class name and the ID name here. So background color, let's say we go give it black. No, not black. Instead, pale green. So let's see what will happen. So you would see that it got to overwrite the class name here, which is the background color pink, because again we followed the specificity here. So technically I applied order here. So anything that is declared last in your declarations here inside of the style tag will be the one that will be followed by the browser. And at the same time, I'm using an ID here which has a much higher specificity over the class name here. So even if I go put this here on top here, let's see what will happen. So these are just key things that you have to be aware of when you're applying certain styling techniques. So you would see that it did not return back to pink because we were using header ID here. So an ID has a higher specificity over a class name. Just remember that. So technically, even if you put the order here in this way, the one that will be applied by the browser will be the ID declaration here over the background color pink here, because it has a higher specificity. So let's just refresh that. But I don't want to use an ID here. I just want to use a class name because I'm considering the idea here that we are inside of a div element that is inside of a header. So we have a block here, and then the element that we have here. So we have the block, which is the header. This is the header, and then we have the element, which is the nav. And here we have the element that we would want to identify as the image from where we placed our image here. Okay, so let me refresh that.